I am in Arizona, Valley of the Sun, Zone 9B. After record temperatures in December, like highs in the 70s, lows in the 50s, we had one frost a couple of days ago, very light, and then we might have a harder frost coming in the next couple of days. So let's go ahead and get the garden ready. Well, I prepare the garden for our next round of freezing temperatures. So first up is our drip system. We want to make sure it's off at least a couple of days before the frost hits. That way our lines have an opportunity to dry, or at least they're not completely full with water. And if we actually get a hard freeze, which doesn't happen often, but it can in little microclimates, it won't burst our lines. So back here under this faux rock, we have the controller for our big system that handles most of the yard. This is one of our newer controllers, and I like it because you have the option to delay for rain for up to 7 days and not lose your settings. That's such a big deal for me, especially when you have 4 outlets. I don't have to keep resetting it. Alright, unlike my older one, let me show you that one. Now, this is our original model. It has an option, you just turn it to off, but after a week it's not going to remember our settings. But I only have one line set up here, so it gets the job done. That's fine, and it's very economical. Leading up to our previous frost, we had a lot of really windy, dry weather. So I want to make sure I want to rehydrate any of my active plants. This is a nice guava that did great this year. I'm in the process of treeing it, and I just want to make sure it's hydrated and happy. I'll be more likely to survive the next frost if it's not dehydrated and the soil actually stays warmer. If it's slightly moist, but not waterlogged. So we're only going to do a quick water. Now, I have a lot of plants that aren't on drip irrigation, and they're small and don't really want to get a deep water. So to increase humidity, I like to run a sprinkler to moisten the mulch that's around all my plants, as well as get some of those smaller plants. And like I said before, we had a lot of dry, dusty wind going on, and I just want to clean off the leaves and just hydrate. Sometimes plants, especially when it's cold, will absorb more water through their leaves rather than their roots. And this AquaJoe is our favorite. It's actually managed to last through the summer, so I'm sold. Probably because it's metal. All right, let's get this set up. On to the next section. After the last frost, I went ahead and completely uncovered the raised garden beds. These are metal beds, so what I want to do is not only expose the surface to sunlight, but also the side, so it can warm up the soil within. So one of the perks of having metal raised garden beds is that they warm up the soil during cold temperatures. And you can see here, during our last batch of cold weather, our tomatoes did get a little damage, but it's just the leaves. These right here are still firm and more than alive, and the leaves close to the ground are still alive. So I went through and just removed any fruit that was set, and what we're going to do is cover these stems with soil and worm castings, and then we're going to add a layer of mulch and just cover the entire thing, because these will root out. This is a tomato. Tomatoes will grow, are able to convert these little hairs into roots if they're covered with soil and moisture. So we'll do that, and that way I won't have to lift them and pot them up to get them through the heavier frost and colder temps. And we'll keep our tomatoes growing. Look, we have flowers already. This one found a perfect little pocket. Dill, and of course all the greens are happy as can be in this weather. And just in case, of course, I'll go ahead and start another batch of tomato seeds. And that's why it's succession plant, because you never know what weather will hit and where you'll have little pockets of warmth. And I have this bed against here because of this wall. which helps hold heat and radiate heat at night. Don't forget to take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Thank you. For the pond, I have turned off the waterfall. You can see our fish are in there happy. I have an aerator, a large aerator with 2 large stones, air stones in here, providing a ton of air. So with the waterfall off, the fish don't have to deal with wildly fluctuating water temperatures, but they're getting plenty of air, and there are a ton of plants in here, some of which are overgrown, and I'll do a video when I show you how I clean up this pond. But for the winter, they'll help keep the water warm, or the water clean, which is easy with just the plants because the fish are not eating or pooping nearly as much as they do during the warm season. And they're really happy. You can see how clear the water is. This is a 20-gallon garden grow bag full of our homemade potting soil, and I'm just tossing this all over tomatoes to make sure I cover the stems, not completely, probably halfway up, and this will give them something to root into. And this is our basil. Apparently we harvested it just in time to make our freezer paste. It looks like I took a hard hit from that frost. However, I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to cut it back. A lot of times with older plants like this is over a year-old basil. It'll grow back when it warms up. So I'll just give it a chance. And who knows, it might be shielding a more sensitive plant underneath. I have one more bed. Okay. So this is the worm castings I'll be using to give our plants a boost. Initially I was going to do 2 separate applications of just worm castings and then fertilize with a fish emulsion kelp solution. But instead of adding more moisture, I just decided I would use this worm castings. It has a blend of kelp as well as blood meal and bone meal and a few other amendments that will help our plants survive the weather. And they generally love this. Another option, if you have somewhere locally to get worm casting, that's great. Or you can have your own worm casting from a worm farm. And I'll put links to all of the supplies I'm using in the description. All right, let's grab our mulch from our hot new shed. We'll talk about this shed later in another video, but I managed to find some really high quality garden mulch in a large quantity at a decent price. So let's spread that. So this is chopped straw, and it's really packed in here, really tight. I'm loving it. That means there's a ton in here and I can get a lot done with this one bag. So I'm just spreading this all over the bed. This is going to provide insulation and trap in the heat from the day. This is actually a couple hours after we put down our castings, our worm castings. So this should help trap in the heat, and then as it breaks down and our microbials start working on it, it'll help, it'll actually provide its own heat as it's being broken down. And here's a close look at this. Look how nice and small these pieces of straw are. So they should form a nice layer on the garden bed. You can see here I'm just putting down a light cover, trying to prevent further damage as well as provide insulation and some nutrients. And we have a calendula flower that should bloom here pretty soon. It loves this weather. They really don't need to be covered. They're a nice cool weather flower. And while I'm working on the garden bed, I'm trying not to disturb this basil. It's in full glorious bloom and it's attracting a ton of bees, which is nice because there's not a lot for them to feed on this time of year. All right, we made it to our last step. Let's get this frost cloth on. So these are also referred to as floating row covers. And I'm just gonna make sure not only do I get everyone covered on these nice flexible hoops structures, but I also need to clip it in because it gets really windy in our area and it's the worst to have to go run back into the common areas to go find my gardening supplies that blew out of the yard or into a neighbor's yard. All right, and here's a look at our like braising green bed before we cover it. Just have a mix of like bok choys, baby catalan, some mustards, garlic of course, lots of herbs like basil, which smells amazing right now, and some peppers that are struggling, but every year they're pretty slow during this time of year, and then they bush up as soon as it warms up. It was great having you along while we did our winter chores, and I hope you enjoyed our garden tour. We'll see you next time. Happy gardening.